Fresh off the certification of the results in 3 very important states, President Donald Trump was originally planning to make a visit to a legislative hearing in Pennsylvania. So this is according to an earlier report from CNN and the New York Times. Trump is expected to join Rudy Giuliani, as well as his one of his lawyers, not Sidney Powell, in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where the GOP state lawmakers were holding a hearing on allegations of fraud in the 2020 election. Yeah, here we go again. Not on his schedule, but it was planned as being an unannounced movement. Yes, I am familiar with unannounced movements involving Donald Trump, or something that you could call a Trump. All right, I'm getting a little too graphic, so let's move on. All right. Hey, wow, look at this hearing. Must be very, very important. I bet this is where they presented the evidence. You know, the evidence that they decided not to present in court when they had a chance to actually affect the election results. But that's okay, because they prevented it, or I'm sorry, they're presenting it to this hearing. Okay. And the reason I keep putting hearing in quotation marks is because it turns out it's not even a real legislative hearing. This is being held by the Pennsylvania Senate Majority Policy Committee, which is a subset of the GOP caucus. Not a real congressional hearing. Not a real congressional hearing. It is not being held at the Capitol, but at a Wyndham Hotel. Because when you need to hold super important hearings that the president could have made a surprise visit to, you book a Wyndham. No, it's a clown show. And so, look, Donald Trump didn't actually go. I'm going to get to the reason why he didn't go. But first, the hearing did happen, quote unquote hearing. And I want to show you a little bit of the insanity. This is Rudy Giuliani explaining how they actually won Virginia.
Number of votes. 65% of the vote had been cast. Under normal circumstances, like if this were a fair media, your state would have been called for Trump. I mean, Virginia was called with 10% of the vote. It turned out to be separated by 1%. I think we may have actually won Virginia, but that's another battle.
Donald Trump lost Virginia by over 10 points. Like, it was 54 to 44%. They didn't get anywhere near winning in Virginia. And in fact, look, early on, the outer layers, like, you know, the more rural parts of Virginia, like in a lot of states, did go for Donald Trump. That is true. Now, the thing about these rural areas, and I love how Republicans always look at this map where there's like, you know, it's like a sea of red in the Midwest, you know, and in a lot of these rural areas, and they're like, I don't understand why we're not winning. Well, that's because in a lot of these very red areas, there's not a lot of people. There's more cows than people in some places. It turns out people vote, land doesn't. I know, shocker, land doesn't vote. And so I guess they would love to go back to the point of time where you had landed aristocrats that only had the power of the vote. They definitely want to go back to that era of time, but we don't live in that era of time. Landed gentry and aristocrats aren't the only people that had the votes. And certainly land doesn't vote, people vote. And it turns out that more people live in cities than anywhere else. Who knew? Shocker. No, he didn't win Virginia. What happened is D.C. Washington, D.C. in Virginia. Washington, D.C. is a city, and they have ballots that were a majority mail-in. So they came in later than the rest of the state. And so, come on. As far as, of course, this whole idea that there was massive voter fraud, think about it this way, okay? 150 million people about voted in this election. That's roughly, right? So now, when you break it down, you realize that there is bound to be some irregularities. Now, those have existed in every single election that we've had. For example, you've got irregularities, votes not counted, some ballots filled out incorrectly and rejected, some errors. It happens. It happens every single time. It happened in 2016. Did the Republicans flip out about this in 2016 and allege massive voter fraud? No. In fact, I don't see Republicans harping on 2016 really at all, save for Donald Trump, who was still pretty salty about not winning the popular vote. I know. He's got such baby thin skin. It's so smooth, so soft. You should make a commercial about it. All right, anyway. Look, overall, the point is, elections have issues, okay? But given the vast majority of votes, look, if you have got somebody saying, well, we found hundreds of potential problems with some of our ballots, even going as far as maybe in some places 1,000. Wow, that sounds like a lot. And even some court cases that threw out several hundred in Pennsylvania, the cured ballots, right? Or the hundreds of ballots, for example, in Georgia that were that had arrived late and had to get cured as well. And so you even take those into context of how many votes were literally actually cast in the election. 79 million for Biden. Throwing out those votes, those small amounts of irregularities aren't enough to overturn an election. And being as though there are irregularities is not saying that there's proof of fraud. Okay? And so understand that they're not going to flip the election and they're not proving voter fraud because they can't. They don't have the evidence. There's just no evidence. Again, flipping this is about, for Trump, this is about flipping this, which, by the way, he called in later and started ranting off and rattling off his conspiracy theories. So he's still on that, and he's still repeating Dominion, Venezuela, all that stuff. Serbia is changing the votes. I don't know what Serbia has to do with it, but that's what's being alleged here. Serbia, Iran. He's picking countries randomly and be like, they're against us. They made it so that Biden actually did not win, even though they said he won, and they're colluding with the media establishment in order to steal the election from me, which I won in every single state. I've got you watch Newsmax, I get 410 electoral votes. I won by a landslide in all of these different states. Oh my God. Just a complete and utter insanity. Complete and utter insanity. And flipping the election is, again, what Donald Trump wants to do. And for Republicans, perpetuating this voter myth fraud, right? This massive voter fraud myth is not about protecting the integrity of the vote. Understand that's never been the issue with Republicans. They actually don't give a damn about the integrity of the vote. No, what it is that they want to make it tougher. And notice how they're like, we want to count all the legal votes, right? Well, they want to make it more difficult for your votes to be legal. They want to put rules and restrictions, roadblocks basically in the way of people being able to cast their votes. It's straight up voter suppression. That's what it's about. And as for the people that they want voting, they want white people. They want white conservatives specifically. I mean, I guess if you're a Republican black person, they'll allow your vote to go through. But generally, if you live in an urban area, they don't want your votes to count. It's true. And look, they've been really, really honest. Republicans have been super honest about this for a long time. Even going back to the godfather of the modern conservative movement, saying, frankly, we don't want more people voting because the more people that vote, and I'm paraphrasing, the more people that vote, quite candidly, our ability to win elections goes down. The more people exercise their right to vote. So we don't want more people voting, and we don't want good government, which means when we get into government, we're going to crash it. We're going to make sure that we don't have good government. And then we're going to make sure less people vote so that we stay into power. And that's what it's always been about with the Republicans. And understand that this is also why Republican right-wing ideology and populism don't mix. If somebody calls themselves a right-wing populist, like Laura Ingraham or Sagar and Jenny over The Rising, right? He's not a populist. He's he's basically an authoritarian that every once in a while says, maybe we should kind of tax corporations a little bit. Ooh, oh my God, populism. Now, understand that corporations, I think most people agree that corporations don't pay enough in taxes. And you know why? Because it leaves it the tax burden for the rest of us to pay. Or else civil, these programs get massively underfunded. There is no such thing as right-wing populism. Generally, it tends to turn into, well, what we've seen with Trump. Ultra-nationalism, xenophobia, and of course, going after the powerless. And so, understand that that's what right-wing ideology is basically about. And so this voter fraud hearing, so-called, is not going to offer up any new information. What it's going to do is going to continue to try to undermine the results of a legitimate election, along with, baseless conspiracy theories that are going to rile people up. Now, that's going to have two different effects. For one, you're going to have Republicans that don't trust the system anymore, like a lot of them do. They don't trust voting. So now that could lead to less Republicans voting overall. It also could lead to violence. Not good. Not good. And so understand that, by the way, before Trump had canceled, his aides did try to talk him out of going. And at first, he was like, no, I'm going to go to the voter fraud hearing, and I'm going to go hear what Giuliani has to say, because Giuliani, very smart, great, tremendous. Well, I'm going to explain. I'm going to go to the Hill, right? Quote, Trump was expected to join Rudy Giuliani and other legal representatives affiliated with this campaign at the event at a hotel in Gettysburg, but it was scrapped at the last moment. The cancellation came shortly after a campaign advisor, Boris Epstein, shared that he had tested positive for coronavirus. Oops. Epstein was at a news conference last week, along with Rudy Giuliani and another lawyer, Jenna Ellis, who were both planning to make the trip to Gettysburg. So together. And so, okay. Gettysburg has ironically led to a loss of, well, you could say new Confederates. Ironic. Super ironic. Delicious karma. Oh, to see their little voter fraud conference not be, visited by the president, except via phone call, I guess, by the very thing that prompted the tens of millions of people to vote via mail anyway, and what they have used as the core of their voter fraud claims, like, oh, mail-in ballots are so corrupt, with no evidence, is just wonderful, great irony. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.